in the local economy. This is quite amazing given the pandemic. And to help the industry recover from the pandemic, the government set up a regional recovery fund. Here in Ballarat, Sovereign Hills, a major economic driver for the Goldfields region, was one of the beneficiaries of this fund. But here I want to call out the most is Premier's advocacy for the health of regional Victorians, and specifically her government support for the Royal Children's Hospital Good Friday Bill, which I chair. Last year, the Premier launched an expansion of Good Friday Bill's funding for regional health services, a major initiative in our 94-year history that benefits sick children throughout regional and rural Victoria. This support has helped the Good Friday Bill expand its focus to help bring the excellence of the Royal Children's Hospital to the regions, including Ballarat. Of the $5.5 million supporting regional health services, Grampians Health has received $1.1 million. And here at the Ballarat-based hospital, these funds were used for nursing chairs, infant resuscitated cots to provide critical breathing support and a venture play space. This means patients can get this critical care closer to home. Premier, thank you for your ongoing support. Please welcome the Victorian Premier, Jacinta Allen. Thank you.
City of Ballarat, and can I acknowledge the traditional owners of the beautiful land on which we're gathered on here today, the Wadawurrung and the Dja Dja Wurrung people, and I say this as Premier, I'll always be proud to acknowledge the longest continuous culture who have had custodianship of the land on which we live and work and gather here today. As the Prime Minister has also acknowledged a number of parliamentary colleagues, I too would like to acknowledge my state parliamentary colleagues, Taylor Settle and Martha Halen, and to all the other dignitaries and guests who are with us here today. I'd also like to start with an acknowledgement of the heartbreak of what occurred in Pawnpukka this week. The murder of 2 Victorian police officers is a shocking and senseless and utterly tragic crime. It's especially difficult for a community like Pawnpukka, because when something happens like this in a country town, it isn't just the families and colleagues who grieve, it is everyone. It casts a dark shadow and it cuts a deep scar across the entire town. Because communities like these are built on closeness, on neighbours who look out for each other, families who both share in one another's joy and who carry each other's pain. And when tragedy strikes, it doesn't just strike one household, it spreads like darkness across the entire community. But just as quickly, so too does the light. And in ways big and small, might be through a hand on the shoulder, a hot dish dropped off at the door, a town that gathers to mourn together and to remember. And it's that togetherness is what makes country people so strong. And it's what will carry Pawnpukka and every town touched by this loss through the days, the months and years ahead. And I say this very clearly, they will not carry this alone. My government will stand with the community of Pawnpukka for as long as it takes, walking beside them and offering them every support these families, their colleagues and this community needs. Because I know that this is what living in regional Victoria is all about. It's what life in the bush teaches you, that when hardship comes, whether it's fire or flood or drought or an unthinkable tragedy like this, you don't face it on your own, you face it together. Neighbours helping neighbours, communities lifting each other up. And it's that togetherness and it's that strength that defines regional Victoria. And it's why many of us here today share one thing in common. We love the bush. We love it enough to live in it, to raise our families in it, to work in it, to build our lives around it. We love it enough to share its burdens together and to fight for its future together. But I say this very clearly. If you live in the bush, you know this one truth, that it can be both beautiful, that it can be brutal. It gives us space, it gives us community, it gives us a way of life that you won't find anywhere else. But I do acknowledge that it can be hard, and I know a lot of Victorians Many are doing it tough. Some of it is because of nature. Some of it is because of nature. Some because of markets, the economy, or the wider state of the world. But I think it's important too to show the world that the other side of the coin is also true. The bush gives you something you simply can't find anywhere else. The fresh air, the quiet, the space. And the sense of community and connectedness. For me, as I raise my kids with my husband in central Victoria, for us it's heading out with the dogs and the kids into the bushland around our house, or starting my day walking through the gum fields. It's watching my kids climb trees, chase the dogs through the shrub, catch fish, and lose themselves in nature. That's what brings us. And if I could just maybe request, I know there's differences of views. One of the things that makes me proud of living in regional Victoria is I turn up and we turn up and listen and respect one another. Respect, and I hope those here today can show respect to others who may be tuning in and allow the proceedings of the day to show the best of country Victoria, to show the best. And I'm going to say I'm so proud of what the work my government is doing. They're real. It's the nurse who takes a job in a country hospital but can't find anywhere nearby to live. It's the young family who love their local school but worry their kids won't have the same opportunities as those in the cities. It's the tradie that wants to raise a family in the town you grew up in but isn't sure if the opportunities will be there. These aren't small things. They're the things that decide where people stay, whether they build a life and where the community grows. Why we're supporting initiatives like the Regional Working Accommodation Fund, so towns can house the people who keep them going. It's why we're making investments in regional hospitals, like that beautiful new hospital in Maryborough and the works that are going on here in Ballarat. Investments too in regional schools, so that every student, no matter what their postcode, gets a great education. It's also why we've upgraded every regional train line, put on more services and slashed regional fares. But also too, we know too that there is always more that needs to be done in supporting regional communities. That for too long, we've been told that living in the bush comes with trade-offs. You can have the space, the freedom, the community, but not the same services or the opportunities as the city, and I don't accept that, and I don't think anyone in our state should. Because country people deserve the care, the services and the opportunities as anyone in Melbourne. And that's my ambition for regional Victoria. A state where your postcode never limits your future, where young people don't have to go away too far, where families can stay and thrive in the place they love, knowing they're not missing out. And also too, more than that, a state that doesn't just protect our way of life in the bush, but builds on it and creates new industries, where we build new opportunities and deliver new jobs. And that's where I wanted to reflect on where we can make the most of our natural resources and the advantages we have. We're seeing it in farming communities, we're seeing it in mining also. When people think of mining in Australia, they often picture the pilbara or the hunter. But when it comes to critical minerals, Victoria is where it's at. These projects that can support thousands of jobs and inject billions Victoria is more than just about today. It is about tomorrow. It's about making sure we have the secure energy service, the secure infrastructure asset that our growing regional communities need. It's about making sure that every country kid has the same chances as a kid anywhere else. Those country kids who want to make sure that their voice is heard, that they have the opportunity to have the opportunities my kids have today and can see their grandkids have in the future. We should be proud of living in regional Victoria because it is the best place to live. We should be using opportunities like today where regional Victoria has the opportunity to show the rest of the country what a strong, united place we are. A place where we have great schools, great hospitals, great services, but most importantly too, a future that is built. A future that is built by regional Victorians for regional Victorians, supporting the indispensable future, because regional Victoria is the heart of our state, it's our strength. I am proud of working hard, and I'll continue to work very hard to make Victoria even stronger for the future.
So I think there we've seen a classic example of our politicians who get up there and tell you barefaced lies, and then they're starting to cop the boos and everything from the people who they're affecting. Hang on.
I will say, I appreciate the family taking the time to be here today. It's obviously been a pretty difficult week in Victoria in all respects. And I appreciate you coming to answer some tricky questions and address this room. I know there's a lot of feeling in the room about a bunch of issues in regional Victoria. I'd appreciate if we can just take a moment to try and hear out the Premier's answers on a couple of questions before she needs to hit the road again, given everything that's going on. Like I said, I know there's a lot of passion in the room. We've got reporters here who can come have a chat to you about those issues during the day as well, but we'll just get through a couple of questions before you hit the road. I wanted to start by asking you about drought, because obviously it's been a really difficult year. There's been some rain over winter, but farmers and townies, they're not out of the woods yet. What's your assessment of the situation, and is there sort of further support that people can expect over the months ahead if we get into a summer and it's dry and the drought drags on?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. It has been a really dry start to the year. We've obviously had some rain over winter, but the advice I received just this week is that the forecast remains a little bit more than a little bit unpredictable in terms of having a wetter spring season. I think I want to particularly go to acknowledge the southwest of the state, where whilst most of the state experienced incredibly dry conditions, particularly over the start of the year, for the southwest they've been experiencing this for some time. And that is why since September of last year we've been progressively listening to those farmers and farming communities and providing funding support that now totals $144 million. And if I can say, Tom, and just reflect on how we got to that package and that amount was as a result of me chairing a drought task force. I made a decision when we received some really difficult weather outcomes in that month of May, where it was amongst the driest on record for a large part of the state. I established a drought task force where I got around the table the VFF, representatives from local government across rural and regional Victoria, people who live and work in farming communities, and even a National Party politician was around the table as well in Peter Walsh. And that we listened, and we had a number of meetings when we visited farms and listened, and that is why we ended up having a package that contained both direct farming assistance for on-farm grants, but also support for strengthening water infrastructure, like funding for the East Grampians pipeline, and also too mental health support. It was something particularly that the CWA was very keen to ensure was part of the funding support. Just in finishing, I want to acknowledge that Federal Minister for Agriculture, Julie Collins, attended one of our meetings here in Ballarat a couple of months ago, and I think we can see as a direct result of her attendance and listening to country Victorian communities, we've seen that really important announcement that the Prime Minister has made here today. And this is what happens when you sit down around the table, out on the farm, listening and hearing what's important, and then responding with important support. And we'll continue, I've made it clear, Tom, we've made it clear, we'll continue to provide support, particularly as we watch very closely the weather season ahead.
If we can just hear out the Premier's answers, again, I appreciate the passion in the room. We just want to get through a couple of questions in the time that we have. I know one of the big issues for people today is energy policy. Obviously talk a lot about that. The Prime Minister before was speaking about that as well. He said he thinks that governments definitely can do better on the consultation with communities. We've done a whole lot of shows that read about renewables. It's really shifted in the last couple of years in regional Victoria. If you had the time over, is there anything you'd like to have done differently? And given the kind of the mood and sort of the anger and frustration in regional Victoria at the moment, sorry, just a second. Is there anything that you think you'd like to do in the years ahead to try and take a bit of the temperature out of that issue?
Look, there's no doubt. There's no doubt that the impact of the changing climate is both impacting how farmers are operating their farming business. It's impacting every part of rural and regional Victoria through the more fierce flood, fire, storm events. I heard the Prime Minister talking about how he and I visited the Horsham Incident Control Centre over the last summer with the fires that went through the Grampians for a number of months. So there is no doubt that regional communities are bearing the brunt more than other parts of our country from that impact of the changing climate. And it is also having an impact on how we need to secure our energy supply. That is why we need to make this transition. And in terms of what we would do differently, I absolutely accept that we have seen...
Sorry.
I would absolutely...
If you can just hear the Premier. Thank you, I appreciate the questions. If we can't hear the Premier's answers, it's going to be pretty difficult. So if we could just give her a moment. Thank you. We're not taking questions.
I appreciate there's a lot of interest in this discussion, and I was actually going to go to your question, Tom, went to what would we do differently. What we have seen, and I will acknowledge that the way a number of the private companies have gone and engaged with landowners has not been acceptable, which is why the government decided to establish BitGrid as an agency.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry, if we can't hear the Premier's answer, it's going to be a little difficult.
It is going to be very difficult, Tom, because again, one of the challenges we have in this discussion is there's a lot of loud voices, but there's also a lot of people who want the information, and I think out of respect to people who are seeking the information, they deserve to hear that, not just from politicians, but from experts and advisors. And I was acknowledging that one of the things that we need to do differently is better engage with landowners, and it's why, whether it's the support that's provided now through the support that landowners can receive in hosting transmission lines on their property, whether it's the compensation arrangements that are being made available. And I think this is one of the challenges that we can have to work through these issues together. We've done it in the past, and the building of energy infrastructure needs to be delivered like we've built roads and train lines. It's acknowledging that we are building for the future, and we will continue to work hard with regional communities because it is about securing the future of all of our communities and towns across rural and regional Victoria.
We just had probably got time for one other question. Is that right? One other quick one. You mentioned roads, obviously that's a form of portfolio of yours, transport infrastructure, and it's another issue that's come through for us in our reporting over the last couple of weeks in terms of the issues in regional Victoria. You drive on regional roads all the time, more work to do, and what do you think can be done between now and the election? Is there anything people can expect to... Sorry guys, we've got one more question. If we can just hear the Premier out, we would appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I do drive on regional roads every single day as someone who lives in regional Victoria, and that is why across the last two budgets we're investing $2 billion. Of that $2 billion on a statewide road repair and maintenance program, more than 70% of that is going to our regional road network. And I do acknowledge that it's a big network and there's a lot of work to be done, particularly. And I know this will not please every ear in this room, but the floods of 22 and into 23 and 24 did huge damage to our road network that we've needed to repair. And that again speaks to some of the challenges we have in regional Victoria. The floods of 22, you talk to people from the community of Rochester where they were hit twice in a period of just over 12 months, speaks to some of those challenges that we have to grasp. And my commitment as a Premier who lives in regional Victoria and works and raising her family in regional Victoria is I'll work hard every single day to make the investments and to build a secure future so my kids and my grandkids and everyone else's can enjoy what we enjoy today. Regional Victoria is a great place and we should be proud.
Thanks for taking the time to come out to the questions today. Like I said, obviously, a lot of passion in regional Victoria. There's a million things we could ask you, and I'm conscious that with everything happening in Victoria, we only have a bit of time, but thank you for coming along and answering questions.
Tom, thank you. Let's turn now to our next keynote. I'd like to introduce the Honourable Susan Lee, the Opposition Leader, to deliver a keynote, followed by an in-conversation with James Wagstaff, editor at the Weekly Times.
They're going.
Thank you everybody, it's lovely to be in Ballarat, quite close to my hometown, Albury, and the wonderful people of this rural part of Victoria are just as amazing as the ones I represent in the election of Ballarat. Can I also add my sympathies, my distress and my deep concern for the circumstances at Paulpunka and the loss of 2 brave police officers, the injury of another, and the ongoing real work, effort and care of the Victoria Police for our incredible communities. Our thoughts genuinely are with everyone today. Such a privilege to be here at the Bush Summit. It's a gathering that recognises the importance of farmers, regional communities and the extraordinary contribution of agriculture to our nation's prosperity. Can I acknowledge colleagues, David Littleproud, a trusted partner, a fine person representing regional Australia across this country, Bridget McKenzie, she's probably out there with the protesters if I know anything about Bridget. Senator Sarah Henderson, a fighter, a warrior for this region and an issue that matters so much for you, transmission lines. And to Brad Batten, the opposition leader, how much care and concern you also have for the circumstances that I just outlined. What a fine job you are doing pushing back against the Victorian Labor government. When we talk about the productivity of our agricultural sector, we're not just talking about economics, we're talking about people, families, and the very story of our nation. For me, it's personal. I raised my children on a farm in northeast Victoria, and now 4 of my 6 grandchildren will be the 5th generation on that same family farm. That makes me immensely proud because it speaks not just to my own family story, but to the resilience and continuity of farming families right across Australia. And it also means I know what it's like to do a full day in the sheep yards, get out of bed at 4:30 a.m. in the freezing cold to feed the potty calves, and live through the uncertainty of the seasons. I know the feeling of watching the skies, watching the weather radar for rain that doesn't come. I know the weight of balancing the farm books late at night, working out how to stretch every dollar just a little further. And I have felt the pride of looking at healthy pastures with the weeds under control, the joy of seeing strong lambs in the paddock, and the satisfaction of a community pulling together in tough times. These experiences shaped me as a person, and they shape me as a political leader today. And I believe they gave me empathy for the daily challenges of life in the bush. But they also gave me tremendous respect for the persistence, the innovation, and the dedication of those who choose to build their lives in rural and regional Australia. It's why I'm proud to lead a party that believes in values that are central to our farmers and our regions. Reward for effort, self-reliance, aspiration, strong families and communities, and a fair go for every Australian. Now, just last week, the Prime Minister convened what he originally called a productivity roundtable. His Treasurer called it something else. It was supposed to be the government's answer to Australia's productivity slump. But if you were listening for any serious mention of agriculture, you would have been disappointed, because it was a carefully choreographed talk fest designed to soften up Australians for more taxes. Life outside the capital cities was barely mentioned, and agriculture didn't rate a mention. But this is the sector that feeds us, clothes us, sustains our regions, and earns billions in export dollars. Meanwhile, under Labor, productivity across the economy has gone backwards by more than 5%. Living standards are down by 6%, the steepest fall in the developed world. Household costs are soaring, families are under strain, but in all of this, agriculture was overlooked. While the Prime Minister plays host to Talkfest in Canberra, farmers are left to battle with rising costs, with red tape, and with uncertainty. When Labor talks, you pay. And when Labor plans, the bush is forgotten. Right here in Ballarat, across southern Australia and into New South Wales, communities are enduring a devastating drought. Farmers are being forced to make heartbreaking decisions, and they're wondering how they can keep their farms afloat. And it's not just the land that suffers when the rain stops, it's communities, it's businesses, and it's families that hold our region together. Now, the Coalition established the Regional Investment Corporation to help see our farmers through tough times like these. Since then, it's delivered more than 3,400 loans, and it's saved farmers more than $350 million of interest. And look, we welcome the Prime Minister's support, but we also understand exactly where the previous question was coming from. These loans should be zero interest. They should be zero interest, because farmers and regional communities actually deserve support at tough times like this. They deserve to have a cash flow, and they deserve not to go backwards in the way that we unfortunately see under this Labor government. And during devastating droughts, we need a government that understands the effect that these droughts have on farmers. It's not just regional farming communities that are being let down by the Albanese government. Regional coastal communities in South Australia have been devastated by the algal bloom and the uncertainty created by the government's inaction and delays. South Australians have urgently needed help, and the government has delivered too little too late. So whether it is the algal bloom or a drought, regional communities deserve more than uncertainty and excuses. This is why the Coalition will always fight for our regions to be heard and to get the support they need, particularly in times of crisis. But despite being neglected, Australian agriculture continues to prove itself as the powerhouse of productivity. In the 23-24 financial year, agricultural multi-factor productivity rose by 7.3%, outpacing every other sector of the economy. Our farmers are innovators, they are entrepreneurs, they are exemplars in sustainability, in resilience and efficiency. From precision agriculture to drought-resistant crop varieties, from robotics in dairy sheds to cutting-edge irrigation systems, farmers are using science and technology to do more with less. They're proving that agriculture is not an old-fashioned industry, but a modern, dynamic, forward-looking part of our economy. And unlike their counterparts overseas, Australian farmers succeed without the crutch of subsidies. Australian agriculture has transitioned out of periods of protectionism to create businesses that are amongst the most efficient in the world. They had to innovate. They had to work harder and smarter. They had to embody the values that define our liberal philosophy: self-reliance, reward for effort, aspiration, and a fair go through open markets. Agriculture is one of Australia's greatest success stories. Our contrast with Labor could not be sharper. Their policies are written on one side of the Great Dividing Range, with little thought for life on the other. They do not understand drought or the threat of floods. They do not understand the tyranny of distance. They do not understand the daily resilience it takes to live and work in rural Australia. Farmers now face the building of transmission lines across prime agricultural land near Ballarat. They see vast solar and wind farms imposed without proper consultation. They are looking at a high-stakes takeover of private property and local landscapes with no consultation. 80-metre tall towers, crisscrossing paddocks, crisscrossing productive farmland, a fire risk, a biosecurity risk, damaging fencing, coercive land access powers, forced access, criminalising farmers if they refuse access for surveys. What on earth is going on? My mantra is simple. If a farmer does not want a high-power transmission line across their farm line, then it should not happen. With no social licence, it should not happen. I am shocked to read of what is passing through the Victorian Parliament as we sit here today. And I cannot believe what I am hearing from farmers who we care deeply about, and from my colleagues in Victoria, who are telling me about this coercive approach that effectively means access onto your properties with no court order and no redress and nothing that you can do about it. Of course, renewable energy has a place in our future, but it's absolutely essential that the impact on our farmers is fully taken into account. For too long, governments have disregarded the voices of people in regional communities. And I want to touch on something that's very close to my heart. This government cannot be trusted on water either. It has a buyback policy aimed fairly and squarely at the Southern Murray-Darling Basin. In fact, in my electorate of Farrow, it's a direct attack on regional towns. When Labor takes hundreds of billions of litres out of irrigation, it's not just water that disappears. It's jobs, it's crops, it's families, it's the very fabric of our regional communities. Labor is not a friend of the bush. But I want to be clear. As a Liberal, I do not accept the false divide between city and country. Having lived and worked in both, I know that we're stronger when we're together. City Australians should take pride in the food and fibre grown by our farmers, while country Australians should know their contribution is valued at the highest levels of decision making. Our cities and our regions rely on each other, just as families and communities do. And the Liberal Party has always believed in strong communities, individual freedom, personal responsibility and opportunity for all. And those values do not stop at the city limits. They belong to every Australian, no matter where they live.
That's why I will always speak about agriculture, not just as a regional issue, but as a national priority. Around the world, investors see the potential in Australian agriculture. Canadian and American pension funds are pouring billions into our farmland and our agribusinesses. The 10 largest investors in agriculture in Australia hold more than $24 billion in assets, and half of those investors are Canadian funds. But our Australian superannuation funds, managing trillions of dollars, are reluctant to back our farms. They say it's too risky or it's too long term. What a missed opportunity. If even a small fraction of our domestic super funds invested in agriculture, it would unlock enormous potential. Irrigation upgrades, food processing facilities, regional infrastructure. Instead, it's often foreign retirees who own the benefits of our success, and that needs to change. There was a lot of discussion at the so-called Productivity Roundtable about how the government could get its hands on the superannuation savings of hard-working Australians in order to fund its pet projects. And on principle, I don't agree with that interventionist approach, but I really don't agree with it when the sector, with one of the best stories to tell, agriculture, does not even rate a mention. I want to give one of the best examples of what is possible. It's the rice industry. In the Riverina, a group of rice farmers pulled their funds back in 1950 to build a mill. That small act of cooperation was the seed of Sunrise, which today is a global food company with a turnover of more than $1.25 billion. They did not just produce raw rice, they created brands, they manufactured products, they sold ready-to-cook packs, snacks and drinks to more than 50 countries. They kept the profits in the regions and created jobs in towns like Lytton and Deniliquin. That is the power of value adding. It shows how farmers can capture more of the supply chain and return more to their communities. We need to see more of it. But it will only happen if energy is affordable and reliable. If government policy supports processing in the regions rather than driving it away. If we want more food processing plants, more dairies, more grain mills, more cold storage in regional towns, then energy costs matter. But under Labor, electricity is up 32% and gas is up 30%. For a processor or a meatworks, that can be the difference between profit and closure. For a dairy farmer, it's money straight off the bottom line. We need an energy policy that, sure, balances environmental responsibility, but with economic reality. That means a broad mix of energy technologies that take into account energy security and price. What it doesn't mean is a one-size-fits-all approach that treats regional communities as collateral damage. Irrigated agriculture is a national asset. Irrigation feeds the nation. The Murray-Darling Basin is home to 40% of all Australian farms and produces $30 billion of our food and fibre every year. These outputs are possible because of the hard work and efficiency of irrigators. They have invested themselves in laser levelling, drip irrigation and water recycling. They produce world-leading yields. And yet Labor has undermined this success by cancelling billions of dollars in dam projects and reviving blunt water buybacks. This is not vision. This is vandalism of our future capacity. The Coalition will always fight for a smarter water policy, for infrastructure, for partnerships with farmers that deliver outcomes for the environment and the regions, because we know you can have both. Friends, I know what life in the bush is like because I have lived it. I have seen the droughts and the dust storms. I have juggled raising children with university study, working stock and running a farm business. I've seen the strain of the tough years on the faces of the people I care about, long after the rains come and the prices improve. I have seen the sheer, dogged determination of our farmers, their creative thinking, their love for their land. They are the keepers of the flame of both resilience and optimism that define rural Australia. I will always stand up for our farmers and regional communities. Not because it's convenient, but because you are an essential part of who we are as a nation. The spirit of the bush is the spirit of Australia. Rural Australia stands ready, I know you do, to do so much more for our country's prosperity. The Liberal Party I lead will always champion rural industries, water security, value-adding and affordable energy. We will fight for a more productive economy, built on the values that matter, reward for those who work hard, take risks and give back, individual freedom and choice, strong families and communities, and a fair go for every Australian. Labor may not be a friend of the bush. The Liberals and Nationals always have been. Under my leadership and David Littleproud's leadership, the Coalition always will be.
Just in the meantime, everybody, it might appear that Jacinta Allen's car may be blocked in a little bit and she might still be here. So just letting people know what we've heard on the grapevine.
Obviously been in Parliament for almost a quarter of a century. As a cadet journalist in the Riverina back in 2001, one of my first assignments was covering your first campaign for Farah, as you towed that clapped out blue caravan around the electorate in an attempt to get people to vote Liberal. It worked. So my first question is, do you still have it? And is it time to dust it off again for a national tour?
Well, James, the caravan lives on. It's a 1979 Millard van, aluminium, and as you may know, they last forever. Is it time to dust it off? Look, I'm prepared to dust anything off to fight hard against this awful Labor government. And if that means dusting off my caravan and even trying to find an old Holden like the one I had that pulled it all those years ago, and just making a really strong point to every single community I went through, because in those days, I come off a pretty challenging period in my life. I'm grateful and thankful for the tough times on the land, because they've given me that determination to fight for other people who've gone through the same thing. And as I drove up and down the Murray River with my caravan, what I learned was the thing I think all politicians need is you have to listen. You have to listen to communities, you have to really hear what they have to say, and then you have to find that fire inside you to go and fight for the things they believe in when you know they're the things that you believe in too.
Absolutely. 3 months into your role as opposition leader, have you got the toughest job in Australia right now?
I don't think I have. I think some of the people I meet every day who have more courage and determination just to get out of bed in the morning because of the circumstances of their lives, they're facing incredibly tough worlds and situations. I'm very grateful to have this job. It's an incredible honour to lead the Liberal Party. It's an incredible honour to stand up for the values that I believe in, that mattered to me when I painted Liberal Party logos on my caravan. I'm surrounded by a great team. I mentioned some of them today. So I wake up in the morning with enthusiasm because I know that our values and the fight we have to have is one that will resonate across every corner of this country. So it's a big job, James, but I'm up for it.
Excellent. By my count, you're the first opposition leader to come from regional Australia since Malcolm Fraser 50 years ago. How much did advocating for the bush and the regions influence your decision to run for the leadership?
I always say that the greatest privilege of my professional life is to represent the people of Farah because they've taught me so much. They've taught me so much because they're rural people, because they are
As I said, the spirit of Australia is in the bush, and everything that makes our country strong and forward-looking and aspirational and gives us what we uniquely have in this country. I see a lot of it that comes from rural and regional Australia. And while I didn't grow up in Australia, I'm a migrant to this country. My family came from overseas. My migrant story is very much the Australian story, and I want to champion that for everyone else who has opportunity but needs everything to get behind them, support them, and advocate their pathway in life and the choices that they make. So we have to have governments that get out of the way, not get in the way, and we have to have governments that focus on growth and the opportunity that agriculture brings to the big growth question of today. I deliberately mention that because I do think it's been overlooked, and I don't think it comes from the bush.
What are your key priorities for the bush going forward? I was out and about in Farah earlier this week, Hay, Morwood, Ballarat, down to Moolameen. Under the radar. There's a lot of angst out there, not just directed at the government, directed at politics more generally. What do you believe is driving that, and how can coalition achieve cut through on that?
My electorate is very defined by, as I mentioned, irrigated agriculture. So a water buyback that actually rips water out of the production of food and fibre is a terrible thing to do. And that actually leaves our region weaker, and it leaves our farmers and our farming communities quite rightly bewildered and angry. And one thing I've talked about in my entire time as an MP has been to champion irrigated agriculture communities. But broader than that, James, and you would have picked up on this, sadly we have a Labor government that has paused and wound back the critical funding that supports the infrastructure that we know we need, because we drive long distances. It's nothing to get in a car and drive 2 hours to take the kids to sport, turn around and do it all again, and just to get medical services, just to get education. The costs of poor infrastructure, poor roads, poor health services, lack of opportunity for education, that all takes its toll. So I don't want to be unnecessarily political. I mean, my job is to hold the government to account. But I actually really do think that this Labor government does not understand rural and regional Australia. I haven't walked a mile in our shoes. I look across the chamber and, without disrespecting a single person, I don't see people that have risked $1 of their own money in a business that they didn't know would succeed, that know what it's like to do it tough. You've got to understand our lives in order to allocate the resources from the budget that we deserve.
So what is the coalition plan to reclaim those 51 odd seats that are needed from the government? They're going to clearly require some fairly substantial policy and targeted reforms.
Policy development is underway, and it's important, and I think I've said this publicly, we perhaps didn't do it as well as we should have or could have in the last Parliament. And I've got a review into what happened in the campaign so that we can reassure people that we learn those lessons and that we do things differently. I'm taking the time with my team to get this right, but we will have a credible, serious policy agenda to take to the next election. And you won't have to wait until the next election until you see parts of that policy. But you are right, James, we did lose a lot of seats. We have to acknowledge that. And the challenge for us in reaching into metropolitan Australia is, and I always use this opportunity to say that the values that matter in the cities, the outer metro regions, the eastern suburbs of Sydney, the Pilbara of Western Australia, the South Australian York Peninsula, they're the same values. People want a party that backs them, to work hard, to have a crack, to get ahead, to give back, to be part of a community. And we should always back the people who build this country. And we know that so many of those come from regional Australia. So part of my mission is always to talk to the cities about the bush, to bring, not just my story of life in regional Australia, but the lives of so many of the people I meet in regional Australia, to bring them to the cities, and anything we can do to encourage people to cross that great dividing range, to see for themselves what life is like, to embrace what it means to really stand up for regional Australia. These are all important themes and initiatives that I want to take on as leader.
Yeah, because obviously a lot of those policies, some are very popular in regional communities, but they don't necessarily resonate well in the city, you know, like which has a more progressive agenda in some respects. You know, if you compare the two Wentworths, the Wentworth and your electorate, where the Murray meets the Darling, you know, a town of 1,500 people, about 200% of locals voted for you at the last election, and you got Wentworth in, you know, the city's eastern suburbs, more progressive, have very strong ideas on things like live export and net zero and a number of other things, but and that's kind of that electorate has shifted more to the once a very blue Liberal Party seat, it's gone more towards the independent and the Keels. How do you juggle those two kind of policy priorities, and will the bush ever be burnt from a policy perspective to save the city, to shore up those city seats?
The bush will never be burnt because we can't do what we do as citizens, producers, people who care about this country without the bush, and that's why the bush side is so important. It's not about one or the other. Now, I'm on my way, by the way, to the Wentworth show, when you and I caught up many years ago, and it's an incredible part of Australia. Lots of people in this room will have been there. The Murray meets the Darling. It's extraordinary in terms of its own productivity and what it does for the country. But I'm going to meet people at the Wentworth show who have family, kids, jobs, connections in the city of Sydney, in the city of Melbourne, and the city of Adelaide. So the conversations I have will of course be about what's happening locally, what's happening to the landscapes and lifestyles right in your region, but they will also crisscross the nation and the world. And those conversations reflect the priorities of Australians. So the challenge, I always say, of bringing the city and the bush together, it shouldn't be seen as something that is too difficult to overcome, or even should be approached with that framework in mind anyway, because we need each other and we know that our futures are inextricably linked. And that's not a difficult conversation to have with anyone.
Is the divide growing though, the city-country divide?
I don't know, no. For exactly this reason, in an increasingly connected country, in an increasingly connected world, that's definitely not happening. People might be living in the far west of New South Wales. I mean, I represent Pooncarie, a small town on the Darling. Once upon a time I represented Broken Hill. And, you know, people jump in the car, go to Adelaide, or fly-out job in Africa or Western Australia, or with the, you know, better connectivity, which by the way needs to speed up under this government, because it's as if it doesn't matter whether we have the right connections in the bush, because of course if you live in the bush and you can't have the phone and data connections that you need, you fix it pretty quickly if you're a politician, but if you don't live in the bush, you don't understand it. But that again enables people with high-speed internet to connect anywhere in the world. So this is, you know, this will bring us together.
Just before we run out of time, the relationship between the Liberals and your coalition partners, the Nationals, obviously we witnessed that split back in May. Did that do more harm than good? And what's the current temperature in the joint party room?
It was a settling-in period. It was an important discussion to have following the election loss that we both experienced, and it was important that we then came together to represent every single person in this room and every single person who believes in holding the Labor government to account and presenting that serious, credible alternative. It's important for the opposition parties to come together and work together. We're doing that in a very presenting that serious, credible alternative. It's important for the opposition parties to come together and work way, because if I look at the range of different views, and of course there are different views inside, that's not something to be afraid of.
So just in front of us,
the views of
interesting to see what he's thinking about with his
contentious issues at the moment in the Nats is obviously net zero. Should net zero be dumped?
Everywhere I go, I talk to people about energy, and I'm glad you've asked this question, James, because we do need to have an energy policy that delivers affordable, reliable energy and plays Australia's role in reducing emissions. But that reducing emissions part and that energy policy, it can't come at any cost. And what we're seeing with this government is no regard for the cost. So we are working through everything that we need to, and I want to reassure everyone here that that is being done in a constructive, policy-focused way. We're listening to people who care, we're listening to people who count, because they are the producers. They understand that if you want to drive productivity in this country, then one of the main factors of productivity in anything you do is energy. And if you don't get that right, you don't get the economy right, and we will stand ready to fight for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Susan Lee. Thanks for joining Susan.
Opposition Leader and James, thank you very much for that. I'd like to welcome back to the stage the Chairman of Herald and Weekly Times and News Corp's Community Ambassador, Penny Fowler, to introduce our next keynote.
Thank you, Kieran. It is now my privilege to introduce Mrs. Gina Reinhardt, AO. She's a great Australian and someone I'm honoured to call a friend. Firstly, I would like to thank Mrs. Reinhardt for her support of the Bush Summit, such an important event which shines a light on both the challenges and opportunities in regional and rural Australia. Mrs. Reinhardt serves as Executive Chairman of Australia's largest private company, Hancock Prospecting, a business founded on the pioneering spirit of regional and rural Australia. One of our most prominent business people, Mrs. Reinhardt is a genuine Australian success story, one with deep roots in the bush. She's equipped with an innate understanding and affinity with regional Australia and its people. She shares your appetite for risk-taking, hard work and national interest. With business interests spanning cattle and beef, including its world-leading Wagyu 2GR brand, mining, energy, property, technology, resources and retail, her efforts have driven jobs, training, investment, infrastructure and prosperity nationwide. Her brands are synonymous with regional Australia, Dryzabone, Kidman Boots, Cattle Clothing and Rossi Boots. S. Kidman & Co. is part of Australian folklore, operating our largest and most respected pastoral properties. And then there is, of course, the US $10 billion Roy Hill Mine, a national asset that ranks among our most important nation-building projects. Mrs. Reinhardt is also such a strong supporter of the communities in which we all work and live in. Her support is wide and varied, ranging from medical and health to education and community organisations. This includes the Royal Flying Doctor Service, which is our Bush charity partner, an organisation that does amazing work around the country. Mrs. Reinhardt is also well known as a patron of Australia's internationally renowned Olympic swimmers, rowers and volleyballers. And the list goes on. She reminds us of the importance of our resources and agricultural industries by funding the annual National Mining and Related Industries Day and the National Agriculture and Related Industries Day. Mrs. Reinhardt is also patron of several organisations, including the Veterans Not-for-Profit Support Service, Soldier On, which is named her an honorary guardian of veterans. Thank you again for your sponsorship of the Bush Summit and for all you do for rural and regional Australia. While Mrs. Reinhardt was unable to be here in person, she's taken the time to share a video with us. Thank you.
Greetings from one of the most historic sites of the Mega Roy Hill project in the Pilbara, Northwest Australia. This mega project required $4.3 billion of equity money and US $7.2 billion borrowed. This was the very site we brought close to 70 bankers, some Australian, mainly from overseas, to introduce them to the project when there was only our camp and a feasibility study. No mine, no infrastructure, except for our Jumbata airstrip. Our camp mess back then wouldn't provide the bankers with much of a memory, so I decided we'd take a gamble and host them outside at this exact scenic spot on the station. Hoping, of course, it didn't rain, but rain it did, just pre them arriving on site. And we had no plan B. Just two snake catchers walking up and down, checking our important guests weren't distracted by snakes. Now, why was it so historic and memorable for our company? Because during our lunch here, I gave a speech, then went around to greet each banker individually. During such meet and greet, two overseas bankers put out their hands and gave me the wonderful news: I'm going to loan you $1 billion. Right in front of our amazed but thrilled to bits then CFO Gary. Yet I don't think I'll ever have a lunch like that again. 19 major banks and 5 export credit agencies, after detailed due diligence and negotiations spanning over 2 years, signed off on loaning us the money. But then a hitch. One of the major contractors, this being for our process plant, became bankrupt. So the banks understandably wanted to have in place prepayment the next suitable contractor. The problem being Hancock and our Royal partners had taken a very risky path, investing our combined equity, $4.3 billion, pre the debt finance was provided. And this delay saw us negotiating with a new process plant builder while also drawing up our closure plans, as our equity money had almost run out. But finance was achieved in time, and our financing still stands as a record for Mainland Resource Project Park Greenfield. Since then, Roy Hill has paid over $11.4 billion in taxes and royalties, including $3.9 billion in royalties to the West Australian government, $7.4 billion in company tax, $265 million in payroll tax, more than $1.5 billion in employee taxes, and more than $310 million in royalties to Indigenous groups. That's more than $10 billion from our project alone, which helps to pay for thousands of nurses, thousands of police, pensioners, tertiary students, defence, and more. Australia would be very different without such revenue from Roy and the greater mining industry. Roy Hill's financing was 12 years ago. What is happening now? According to the Minerals Council of Australia, 80% of projects in the pipeline are on the casualty list. With me are 3 of my fantastic CEOs, Gary Corday, CEO of Hancock Prospecting, as well as Stuart Johnson, CEO of Hancock Energy, and Sanjeev Manchanda, CEO of New Projects. Stuart, what are the challenges of providing sufficient energy to support mining?
So a lot of the people watching this will know the last 3 years especially, the electricity bill has gone up at least 20 or 30%. And the situation is no different for big companies. Today, in addition to the bureaucracy, we have additional issues. We have costs, we have availability, we have security of supply. And in my view, the cost and availability go together. So when you install renewables, so-called renewable energy, you've got the upfront capital costs of the solar panels or the wind turbines, then a network of connecting transmission lines. But in addition...
And probably the batteries too.
And batteries as well, if included. But in addition to that, you've got to pay for the backup system, the gas or the diesel. It's because the so-called renewable energy of solar and wind cannot underpin baseload requirements. Especially in mining operations, which Sanjeev has already explained, 365 24-hour-a-day operations that require reliable power. Without getting too technical about it, the capacity factor for solar, which is the amount of time that it's actually making electricity, is only around 20%. Wind maybe slightly better, perhaps 30%. But there's also periods across all of Australia where they're not available at all. And just by simple comparison, that compares poorly with, say, gas turbines, which are available 85–95% of the time. And finally, when we talk about security of supply, that also relates to having enough gas or diesel available when you need it. And currently we do have sufficient gas, but with the lack of investment we see, shortfalls are very possible within a few years. And already, for diesel and almost all our refined products, we're entirely reliant on imported fuels. And we only have, for that, about a fortnight's reserve. So, I think if we discourage investment in traditional energy sources in the traditional energy industry, the consequence, with the technology we have today, is you're going to have high cost, inadequate, and unreliable energy. And that will affect all industries, homes, hospitals, and everything else.
So, Gary and Sanjeev, what are examples of other countries doing to actually encourage mining investments?
Well, I'll use Saudi Arabia as an example. They have Vision 2030 initiative where they're seeking to make mining the third pillar of their economy alongside oil and petrochemicals, which they already have. To support mining investors, Saudi is offering a range of strong incentives. The top incentives that I'll just refer to, the Industrial Development Fund covers up to 75% of project financing, including for infrastructure. There's a 5-year royalty grace period for mining licenses that are issued. There's also a royalty discount of up to 90% for companies that are prepared to invest in local downstream industries. They're also pre-clearing land for mining, and any conflicts with other agencies are actually resolved by the government in advance. The Saudi government has listened to major investors. When I travelled to Saudi, I can say that they were genuinely proud to be building a mining industry in the country, and there's open and vocal support for mining from the Saudi government, which is fantastic to see.
I've heard that they actually want to build a world-class mining industry.
Absolutely, they refer to that all the time.
Sanjeev, how did you find our very recent visit to Argentina?
Well, in Argentina, President Xavier Milei has opened the doors to international investment. In the year since his election, Argentina has posted a budget surplus. It has significantly reduced inflation, streamlined a bloated bureaucracy averaging 2 rule eliminations revisions per day. It has simplified the tax regime, aiming to eliminate 90% of taxable events. Introduced a scheme called the RIGI, which offers a range of incentives, legal protections, and stability measures to create a strong and secure environment for large-scale investors. In short, President Milei has rolled out a red carpet for investments into the country. For any investment that is over 200 million, he has announced even more streamlined approvals. I was recently, when I was in Argentina, I attended the mining exhibition called Minera, which showed the mining sector was buoyant, the miners, the equipment suppliers, and the exhibition had grown exponentially with companies participating and exhibiting coming from all around the world.
Gary and Sanjeev, how will the chasing of expensive net zero targets impact on our way of life?
Well, I think the short answer is significantly. Australia chasing unobtainable and expensive net zero targets is going to negatively impact our way of life for generations to come. The mining industry is a price taker. We don't set the price of commodities on the international markets. Our mining and energy industries are major employers, as we all know, as well as major payers of income tax and royalties. If the soaring energy prices damage our companies' competitiveness, then we'll all lose. In FY 2023, the resources industry paid corporate tax of $54.7 billion, which was more than all of the other industries combined, with another $31.5 billion paid in royalties. This is the money that is then used to pay and fund nurses, police, defence, pensioners, and even disabled persons and their carers. If there are fewer future projects, this funding will reduce and we will all be directly impacted, including our most vulnerable citizens.
As I said earlier, we are creating a framework of unrealistic and impractical objectives, targets, and for comparing ourselves with the others in the remainder of the world's larger economies, who are taking action to support and grow their economies. What we should expect to see is closure in the end of economic activities, like we have recently seen with the nickel mining industry and steel production, where Australia has become non-competitive. What this means is loss of direct jobs, indirect jobs, and loss of jobs in related industries. All of those skilled and highly paid jobs, loss of the revenue to the government from loss of taxes, royalties, and less money is available for emergency services, pensioners, police, nurses, and hospitals. Our skilled workforce will be forced to look for jobs at overseas locations.
Carrie, how do you think that government policies should be changed to bring back investment to Australia?
Well, I think we should follow the lead of the US and pull out of the Paris Accord for a start. This is the biggest opportunity to improve Australia's attractiveness for investment. We also need to reduce the quantum of approvals and their length of timeframes by setting strict time limits for approvals, processes, and removing duplication between state and federal, and quarantining regulatory responsibility between departments to remove the overlap.
Everywhere you look, from homes, hospitals, vehicles, fire brigades, TVs, offices, iPads and mobile phones, there's very little that doesn't contain mined minerals, including machinery needed to make everything, from home appliances to cars and planes. Even our very defence, we can't do without minerals. Nor can our essential Royal Flying Doctor Service operate without firstly mining minerals. Despite the negative words of media and others, what we miners do is essential. The metals and minerals we provide build and maintain the world, from electricity to AI and bridges and far more. There's almost nothing that doesn't require mining minerals. All that needs are machines made of minerals, including to provide the clothes we wear, even the food we eat. We would simply not have the country we live in and our standards of living if it were not for mining.
Thank you, Mrs. Reinhardt. We're going to take a short break quickly. Before we do, we'll hear from one of our national partners. Please be sure to enjoy some of our sponsor activations in the break. For those in the room, you would have already started your day fueled by Optus, who've partnered with local suppliers to provide breakfast boxes. Recharge at the CommBank coffee station, enjoy a coffee, keep you energised.